Okay, let's dive in. Today, we're doing a deep dive into modern Russian air power. We're sort of cracking open this stack of sources you've shared with us, articles, notes, things that give us a really detailed look at the aircraft. The types and numbers, their roles, even where they came from across the Air Force and their naval aviation. Our mission here is to really unpack this inventory. What does it actually look like? What capabilities does it represent? And, well, what story do the numbers and maybe the age of these aircraft tell us about Russian air power right now?
Yeah, the sources give us the headline pretty much right away. Taken as a whole, Russian air power is, well, it's vast. In sheer numbers, only the U.S. Air Force has more. We're talking a total fleet strength of, 4,166 aircraft?
The total number is certainly impressive on paper, no doubt. And the inventory itself, it's clearly built to cover a huge range of missions, everything from interception, air superiority, controlling the skies, right through to strike missions, strategic bombing, close air support for troops on the ground, and a very, very substantial component for transport and other support roles, too. Right, and the sources point out a fairly balanced split, don't they, between fixed-wing aircraft, making up about, 77.6%, and then rotorcraft helicopters at 22.4%. But like you hinted, the real story isn't just that big number or the split, it's what's in those numbers.
Absolutely. That's the key. The high-level context here is that this fleet, it isn't uniformly modern. Not at all. It's a really significant mix. You've got some genuinely advanced modern types, but they're operating right alongside a huge number of, frankly, aging designs. Many go right back to the Cold War, developed during the Soviet era.
Yeah.
And critically, if you look at the aircraft types with the most individual planes,
Yeah.
a large chunk of them are the older ones.
Okay, and this is where it gets really interesting, looking at the specifics in your source material. Some of these older types, they aren't just hanging around. They
Yeah.
seem to form the absolute backbone of certain fleets just because there's so many of them. Like, take the Air Force helicopter fleet, the Milmine 817 series. It stands out dramatically. The sources list a staggering 746 units.
Yeah, staggering is the word.
And they call it the backbone of the support fleet. It's described as aging, sure, but incredibly versatile. Transport, even a gunship role. And it came straight out of the Soviet era. Think about this scale, too. Nearly 20,000 examples built globally, across all the variants, over its whole history. That's not just a number. That's like industrial scale production from a different time.
And that volume is precisely why they remain so central today. Even if the sources assess them as, aging, obsolete, maybe near obsolete, they were just produced in such immense quantities that they're basically irreplaceable in the short to medium term. They can still do essential jobs, often the less demanding ones where, cutting-edge tech isn't strictly necessary.
Yeah.
They provide mass, basic utility.
And you see this pattern again with the fixed-wing aircraft, right? The Su-24 strike platform, 273 units listed, still very prominent. It's a design from deep in the Cold War. First flew 67, service entry 74.
That's right. The Fencer?
Then there's the C-25 close air support aircraft, CAS. The source explicitly calls it an obsolete design from the Soviet era, entered service 81.
The Frogfoot.
Yeah, the Frogfoot. And there are 196 units listed. It was famously built tough, wasn't it? Like a flying tank, meant to survive near the front lines.
Both the Su-24 and Su-25, they really embody that Soviet-era design approach we were just talking about, prioritizing things like robustness, simplicity, mass production.
Yeah.
Maybe over stealth or the latest electronics. Now, they might struggle in a modern high-threat environment against, say, advanced air defenses or newer fighters, but their numbers mean they still represent a significant capacity. They can deliver ordnance, assuming they can get to the target.
Even the strategic transport fleet shows this. The Ilyushin Il-76, a Soviet Air Force mainstay, still flown in considerable numbers by the modern Russian Air Force, 120 units.
Yeah, despite being labeled obsolete in the sources.
Well, transport aircraft like the Il-76, they're workhorses, aren't they? While the design is old, the basic job, moving lots of cargo or troops, doesn't fundamentally change. So keeping those airframes flying, even if it's getting more expensive, is just essential for their logistics. And maybe surprisingly, the trainer force reflects this too. The Aero L-39 Albatross, a jet trainer from the Cold War, originally, check, still used in large numbers for advanced jet training, 210 units listed. And the sources even mention production restarted in 2023 for this aging design. That's quite telling.
It really is. Restarting production of a simpler, older design. Well, it might just be a pragmatic choice, maybe compared to trying to rapidly scale up production of a more complex, modern trainer. Especially if he has constraints, resources, advanced components, it suggests they need volume in training, even if the platform isn't the absolute latest tech. So yeah, this whole first part paints a picture of a force still heavily reliant on the sheer number of aircraft built decades ago,
Yeah.
fulfilling essential roles.
Okay, so we have this foundation. It's built on sheer numbers of older types. But what happens when we look at the newer aircraft, the ones joining the fleet more recently? Is modernization actually happening at a pace that's changing the overall picture?
Modernization is definitely underway, and there are significant new platforms entering service, no question. However, as the sources show, the numbers of these truly new or maybe significantly upgraded aircraft, they're generally smaller than the legacy types we've just been discussing.
So it's less about replacing old planes one for one and maybe more about adding pockets of advanced capability.
Precisely. That's a good way to put it. These newer platforms, they often represent significant leaps in capability. They bring advanced sensors, better weapons, modern electronic systems. The sources often categorize them as modern solution or new procurement. For example, the Sukhoi Su-35S, 118 units listed, highlighted as a primary air superiority platform, a new procurement, explicitly noted as succeeding the aging Su-27 line in that role.
Okay.
Then you have the Su-30 series, essentially a modern solution offshoot of the Su-27 design. There are 110 in the Air Force, plus another 34 in the Navy. It's a key multi-role fighter. And the sources even specify that 19 of the Air Force's Su-30M2s are specifically set up and used for combat training.
Interesting. And on the helicopter side, what's the picture with newer attack helicopters?
Right, attack helos. You have two modern solution types prominent in the sources. The Kamov Ki-52 Alligator, known for that distinctive coaxial rotor design,
Uh-huh.
127 units in the Air Force, 3 in the Navy listed. And then the MIL Mi-28, 95 units in the Air Force, though 12 of those are used as trainers. It's a dedicated attack type, maybe more comparable to something like the American Apache.
And for training, there's a newer jet trainer meant to move beyond that old L-39, right?
Yes, the Yakovlev Yak-130, that's a new procurement advanced jet trainer, 111 units listed. The sources mention it's highly capable, can even double as a light attack platform.
Ah, okay.
So it offers some operational flexibility beyond just training new pilots.
What about the real cutting edge then? The fifth generation fighter. How many of those are actually flying?
That would be the Sukhoi Su-57 Felon.
Mm-hmm.
It's listed as their new procurement fifth-gen fighter response, conceptually, comparable to the American F-22 Raptor or F-35. However, it's only very recently entered operational service. Very recently. The sources show a surprisingly small number in the active inventory right now, just around 11 units.
Only 11. Wow.
Yeah. Now, the sources do note 78 are on order, and its footprint is increasing. But that number of active airframes tells you it's still in the very early stages of integration into the main force.
So despite maybe the hype around it, its actual impact on the overall fleet capability right now is still quite limited just based on those numbers.
Exactly. And that pattern, small numbers for the really new types, holds for others mentioned too. The MiG-35, just 6 units listed. A new procurement noted as the ultimate evolution of the MiG-29 line, bringing modern ground attack capability.
Okay.
And the MIL-MAN 38T transport helicopter, only 2 units currently operational, 2 more on order. It's intended as the future medium lift transport, meant eventually to succeed those ubiquitous Mi-817s. But clearly, that transition is barely even beginning.
I also saw mentions of future orders for strategic aircraft and trainers.
Yes, that's right. The sources specifically point out that 10 Tu-160 supersonic strategic bombers are on order, and also 150 Yak-152 advanced jet trainers. So that indicates continued investment, albeit perhaps, measured investment, across the spectrum, from the high-end strategic assets right down to the basic training platforms.
Okay, so beyond the core, fighters, bombers, transports, your sources detail this fascinating array of aircraft doing highly specialized missions.
Oh, yeah. These specialist aircraft are absolutely critical. Even though their numbers might be small compared to the fighters or transports, they provide essential enabling capabilities, things the rest of the force relies on, like command and control, intelligence gathering, strategic reach. So, in strategic bombers, besides the aging Tu-22M and the Tu-95.
The backfire and the bear.
Exactly. You have the Tupolev Tu-160 Blackjack. The sources list 16 units currently, highlighted as a supersonic swing-wing bomber, noted as the Soviet Union's answer to the American B-1 Lancer back in the day.
And for moving really massive amounts of cargo, they rely on some absolute giants.
They do. The Antonov An-124 Ruslan, huge plane, 4 units listed, and the Antonov An-22A, 5 units. These are their primary strategic airlifters. The sources emphasize their incredible size and capacity, definitely,
Yeah.
but they also note the big downsides. They're obsolete designs, and they're increasingly expensive and difficult to operate and maintain.
Makes sense.
Then for crucial support roles like Command and Control C2 and special missions, they operate aircraft like the Ilyushin IL-22, 17 units in the Air Force, 2 in the Navy, and the IL-80, 3 units. These serve as airborne command posts, sort of flying headquarters.
Got it.
The Bereave A-50, with 13 units in the Air Force and 7 of those are modernized to the U model. That serves the absolutely critical AWS-S role, Airborne Warning and Control System, providing that vital airborne radar picture to direct other forces.
So basically their version of the American E-3 Sentry AWS planes.
It's exactly that. And for intelligence gathering, specifically SIGINT, Signals Intelligence, and ELINT, Electronic Intelligence. They use platforms like the Ilyushin IL-20, 12 in the Air Force, 2 in the Navy, and the Tupolev Tu-214R, just 2 units listed there. Radar jamming capability is provided by aircraft like the AN-12PP and IL-22PP, again in smaller numbers.
And reconnaissance?
For reconnaissance, they have types like the AN-30, the Tu-214, again in a recon variant, and a really unique high-altitude aircraft, the M55. The sources list just 1 unit of the M55, and they compare it directly to the American U-2 spy plane for its high-altitude surveillance role.
Wow, only 1.
Yeah, very specialized niche capability.
And the sources included a pretty notable anecdote about the risks these high-value assets face.
Yes, they did. The source material specifically notes that 1 IL-22 airborne command post and 1 A-50 AWACS aircraft were reportedly lost to Ukrainian air defenses back in January 2024. That single detail, it really underscores the vulnerability. Even for these critical, arguably irreplaceable assets in a contested environment, it shows the challenges they face.
It's not just the Air Force operating all this, though. Russian naval aviation, they operate some of the same aircraft types, but they also have their own specialized wings, right? Tailored for maritime operations.
Definitely. Russian naval aviation is its own distinct component. Adapting capabilities for the sea that do operate maritime variants, or sometimes just standard versions, of frontline fighters, like the aging Su-27, 53 units listed for the Navy, the MiG-31 Interceptor, 32 units, and some of the newer Su-30s as well, 34 units with the Navy.
Okay.
But they also have aircraft specifically designed for carrier operations, or intended for them at least. The aging Su-33, 35 units, that's a navalized Su-27, adapted specifically for carrier decks. Then there's the modern solution MiG-29K with 22 units. The sources note it reportedly replaced the Su-33 in the carrier role after a pretty lengthy development. So again, you see that mix of legacy and more modern capabilities, even within this specialized naval branch.
And their naval helicopters are quite distinctive, aren't they? Especially the ones from Kamov.
They really are. The Kamov Ka-27, 90 units listed. That's the primary helicopter type for Russian naval aviation. It's heavily optimized for anti-submarine warfare, ASW, hunting submarines. And it uses Kamov's signature coaxial main rotor setup. You know, the 2 rotors, one above the other, spinning opposite ways.
Right.
Other Kamov naval helos include the K-29 for assault missions and the K-52K, the naval attack version, though both in smaller numbers.
What about fixed-wing planes, specifically for patrolling the seas? Hunting subs from the air?
Maritime patrol and ASW roles, yeah, they're also covered by fixed-wing aircraft. There's the modern solution Tupolev Tu-142, 24 units. It's actually based on the Tu-95 Bear Bomber airframe.
Interesting.
Then the aging Ilyushin IL-38, 21 units. That one's based on the old IL-18 airliner. And they still operate a small number, just 6 units, of the aging Bereave B-12 flying boat.
A flying boat still.
Yeah. And speaking of flying boats, a truly unique modern solution in the naval inventory is the Bereave B-200. Sources list just 1 unit currently. It's a jet-powered flying boat designed for maritime patrol and other roles, and it's capable of taking off and landing on water. Offers a very specific operational flexibility.
And your sources flagged something interesting about aircraft originally from Ukraine being used in their naval aviation.
Yes, that's a notable point from the source material. Russian naval aviation operates some aircraft of Ukrainian origin, like the An-26 Transport, 26 units, assessed as obsolete, the An-72, 5 units, also obsolete, and the An-140, 4 units, which is actually listed as a new procurement type.
Okay.
But the source includes a specific note. It emphasizes that the future operational readiness, the sustainability of these Ukrainian origin aircraft in Russian service, well, it might be jeopardized without ongoing support, maintenance, access to spare parts, especially given the current geopolitical situation and the conflict. It's a direct operational consequence of the wider context. So, okay, pulling all this together, I think the primary takeaway from this deep dive into the sources is pretty clear. Russian air power is vast in total numbers, undeniably second globally by that metric. However, the composition of that fleet, when you look closer, reveals this significant reliance on older Soviet-era designs, often present in very large quantities, operating alongside a much smaller, though growing force of modern, more capable aircraft.
So this blend, it paints a complex picture, doesn't it? A nuanced one. On one hand, the sheer volume of those older airframes, it provides essential mass, capacity for lots of missions. But their age, that inevitably brings substantial maintenance challenges and likely places significant limits on how effective they can be, especially against more modern adversaries or in environments with, advanced air defenses or heavy electronic warfare.
Exactly. On the other hand, the newer platforms, they bring the advanced capabilities. Better sensors, precision weapons, improved survivability. But they're simply not available in the same numbers. Not yet, anyway. Not like the legacy fleet. This means the overall capability of the Russian Air Force isn't uniformly high across the board. It's very much a mixed picture. You've got these pockets of high-end capability embedded within a much larger, older structure.
So for you listening, understanding this balance between the high volume older systems and the lower volume advanced ones, it feels absolutely crucial. It helps move beyond just looking at the top line total number of aircraft. It gets more to the heart of what Russian air power can actually do today. Its potential strengths, maybe based on mass, and its likely limitations based on age and the pace of modernization across all these different roles and branches. So given this fascinating picture we've built from the sources, this force with huge numbers of aging workhorses right alongside a smaller fleet of really advanced platforms, here's a thought to leave you with. What do you think is the biggest challenge Russian air power faces right now, based on this inventory we've discussed? Is it the fundamental hurdle of just maintaining operational readiness and effectiveness across that massive aging fleet, all that maintenance, keeping things flying?
Yeah.
Or is it maybe the challenge of rapidly integrating and scaling up those newer, more complex systems to truly transform the force, getting enough of the good stuff out there, something to mull over after this deep dive?